Breaking news from the NFL, Bill OBrien has been fired as coach. He's also the GM in Houston. He's out in that role as well. Houston currently 0-4, and this OBrien's 7th season as head coach of the Texans. Now, OBrien was not without success, only one losing year, and made the playoffs 4 times. Last year, 10-6, year before, 11-5, but could not survive an 0-4 start this year. Bill OBrien done with the Texans. All right, to help us sort through this, Danny Crennel, NFL quarterback, and we have Jonathan Jones, CBS Sports NFL insider, senior NFL insider, in fact. I'll start with you, JJ. What do we know about this situation? We knew it was bad in Houston. I mean, it was a tough start to the schedule. I mean, it was Kansas City, it was Baltimore, it was Minnesota, it was and all of a sudden now he's out.
Yeah, so not a surprise that they necessarily started 0-2. You mentioned it, right? It was Kansas City, it was Baltimore. Then you got Pittsburgh. Yeah, okay, you want to win that one, but all right, you start 0-3 again, just like you did 2 years ago when he was able to go 11-5. But you just can't lose to the Minnesota Vikings, and you can't lose to the Minnesota Vikings the way that the Houston Texans did, where that offense looked completely inept. So at some point, who's to blame? Because Deshaun Watson is still playing at a very high level, and he deserves every penny that he got in his contract. Boy, would be great if you had a downfield, reliable threat there at wide receiver. Oh, wait, you traded him for David Johnson and his contract. It was a ridiculous move when it happened. It was never going to look good upon looking back at it. And so what I see when I look at this organization is Cal McNair, now the owner of the Houston Texans, taking over for his late father, Bob McNair, who then after Rick Smith left his GM role in Houston, gave that GM title to Bill OBrien. And Bill OBrien, it's never good when you don't have a system of checks and balances. Jack Easterby has been there for some time now, but Bill OBrien had final veto power. He was the decision maker, and we saw how that reared its ugly head there in Houston where, okay, you're not winning on the field and you're making suspect moves there in the front office. A change has to be made. I did not have him, EK, being the first head coach fired this season, certainly when Matt Patricia only has 10 wins in his entire career with the Detroit Lions, but Bill OBrien out.
We also have Atlanta, we've got the Jets, we've got some other spots. Danny, this is a guy that makes the playoffs, it feels like, every year. He has double-digit win seasons last year and the year before, and this year started with the Super Bowl champ Kansas City, the regular season champ Baltimore, at Pittsburgh with Ben Roethlisberger back, and then Minnesota, who was a playoff team and won at New Orleans last year. All right, they're 0-4. We don't want that. Is this too quick a hook for the coach, Bill OBrien?
EK, are you his agent? Is that what you're doing right now? Are you politicking for him?
But to be fair, I am his classmate in college. We didn't know each other.
There you go.
But we both went to Brown. We were in the same class, but I didn't know him. I've never met him, but go ahead.
It feels to me this was inevitable, and it feels to me like this has been a long time coming. I remember last season, the beginning of last season, there were some bookmakers, some odds makers out there who had Bill OBrien as the favorite to be the first coach fired last season. It does feel like this has been a long time coming. And one of the reasons they haven't done it is because of the success that they've had, what in times has been a really bad division. Like when Andrew Luck is out, when Jacksonville's a disaster, when you're in a bad division, that can, perpetuate the process. That's one of the reasons Bill OBrien has had a lot of success within that division, because the division hasn't been very good. This team never really felt like it was a Super Bowl contender. Maybe this was, okay, we see the opportunity where no one's going to question us. We're 0-4, and even more on this, and Jonathan alluded to this, the DeAndre Hopkins trade, you made a decision to part with somebody who I do think was popular in that locker room. When you do that, you run the risk of losing that locker room. I think that's why this team has not looked very competitive. They have not looked into it. I don't think this team was responding to Bill OBrien, which I think made this start an easy out for the Texans ownership to say, you know what? This is when we're going to cut ties and we can start looking forward to the future.
JJ, I'm sort of hearing you guys, and what I'm sort of getting is that Bill OBrien, the GM, got both of them fired. Bill OBrien, the GM, and Bill OBrien, the coach. Because you can't really argue with the record as a coach. I mean, there are almost the vast majority of franchises in the NFL would take a guy that went 9-7, 9-7, 9-7, had a bad year, 11-5, 10-6 last year. The guy has a winning record every year. He goes to the playoffs every year. And he's gone after just 4 games this year. Did the GM get the coach fired? Bill O'Brien the GM and Bill O'Brien the coach.
Yeah, I think that absolutely was sort of the cascade, sort of the avalanche here because, look, let's also remember back with the DeAndre Hopkins trade, they didn't trade him because they didn't necessarily want to pay him. You know, he and Bill O'Brien really butted heads. And remember the strange sort of reports that were coming out of Houston about certain things that Bill O'Brien had said to DeAndre Hopkins, and then afterward both of them tried to sweep that under the rug and say, all right, well, that's in the past and whatnot. I have moved on. That's what DeAndre Hopkins said. But that happened. And then, you know, Bill O'Brien tried to bring in Earl Thomas, and the team, you know, reportedly said, yo, we don't want that guy here. You look at what they have in the 2021 draft where because of terrible trade decisions, they don't have a pick until round 3. Now, it'll be high in round 3 if things continue the way that they are going, but they don't have a first or a second round pick, and Miami obviously owns them because, of course, he made a terrible trade for Laramie Tunsil that, of course, backed them into a corner where they had to pay him as the highest paid left tackle in the NFL when certainly Laramie Tunsil has not played as such. And we understand just because you're the highest paid doesn't mean that you are number one, but they backed themselves into the corner because of what they gave up for him. Remember what they didn't get for Jadeveon Clowney. We can continue to go through this and through this. There should have been a system of checks and balances on Bill O'Brien. There were not. That was a mistake by Green owner Cal McNair taking over for his late father. And I hope for the sake of the Texas organization moving forward that this will be a lesson learned.
Danny, as an NFL player who's been in locker rooms and seen organizations and hierarchies, if we sort of agree that the coach overall during his tenure has done a good job, but the GM has not done a good job, can you go to a guy and strip him of his GM title, keep him as the coach, bring in a GM who basically does what he used to do and sort of have that work? Or once he's the GM, if it doesn't work in either role, they both got to go? Could it have worked with him staying just as the coach?
I don't think so. I don't think Bill O'Brien would have agreed to that. Maybe he would have to salvage his job. But man, and that also sends a message to the players, hey, your coach isn't as powerful as he thinks he is. And I think that power did bother some of those players. And again, a lot of this comes back to the trade with DeAndre Hopkins. I do think some of those things that came out were underlying issues when it wasn't only DeAndre Hopkins who was looking at Bill O'Brien with a little bit of a side eye, like, do we trust this guy? How much can I relate to this head coach? The one thing that I thought was interesting, EK and JJ, was that at the end of last season, remember there was some concern, and Deshaun Watson backed his head coach. And I was a little bit surprised by that. It was a strong statement, probably one of the reasons they didn't make a change. And yes, you had a victory in the playoffs, and yes, you did have a pretty nice run, but then you blew that massive lead. But I think one of the reasons was the backing of Deshaun Watson. That is the most important position on the team. He's been pretty good with quarterbacks. But if you look at Deshaun Watson's numbers and you look at his development, it has kind of plateaued somewhat. I'm waiting for Deshaun Watson to take that next step. And I think that has to be priority number one for the Houston Texans, is to find the coach that's going to take Deshaun Watson to the next level. And I have the perfect guy for you. Go call Kansas City. Get Eric Bieniemy ready to go as soon as you can hire him. I know it's an issue because they're probably going to be in the playoffs, but he is the next man up in the coaching circles, is an offensive mind who has helped develop Patrick Mahomes. Bring in Eric Bieniemy to Houston and don't even think twice about anybody else.
If I'm Eric Bieniemy's agent, because you accused me of being, you know what I'm saying about Eric Bieniemy? We don't want this job. We want a better job. Is this going to get better in Houston?
They don't come around. They don't come around that often,
we know
though.
there's always going to be 5 or 6 jobs. And here's what I'm saying. They just ran a guy out of town that basically had a winning record every year, and they don't have a first-round pick, as you pointed out. They don't have a second-round pick. They've made bad trades. They don't have a lot of talent, and you're going to go in there and try to win when the expectations are not going to be 7-9, 8-8. You've already seen 9-7 get you run out of there. I don't want this job if I'm Eric Bieniemy. Is it going to get better in Houston next year and the year after, or you think it's going to get worse before it gets better?
Yeah, 9-7 gets you run out if all the players don't like you, if you continue making poor decisions, if you don't take care of the future of the franchise. When I look, and Danny, I completely agree with you. When you look and you see what Eric Bieniemy has done there in Kansas City, along, of course, with Andy Reid, with Patrick Mahomes, this does make a lot of sense. Now, you know, to your point, EK, as Danny says, there's only 32 of these jobs. Not all 32 are good jobs. And, I think a lot of people who were rooting for Eric Bieniemy to get a head coaching job were happy when it didn't work out in Cleveland, for example. Not all of these jobs are created equally. There's obviously an issue with minority head coaches in the NFL, and when you look at really the past 10, 15 years, you see that these guys, whenever they do get jobs, usually get rebuild programs. And how fair is that or unfair, we continue to see. But when I look at Eric Bieniemy to Houston, it makes so much sense because he does have Deshaun Watson. Now, you have to protect Deshaun Watson, and that's something that has not happened in Houston for some time. You have to give him weapons. Well, he had weapons, and then Bill OBrien, of course, traded them away. So you do worry about 2021 just because they don't have any capital there on Thursday, and they just have one draft pick on Friday night of the NFL draft. All those things said, though, Houston, it is good to go ahead and get in line first. As we have seen any number of years, they're going to have a gigantic head start on everyone else. And listen, when all of these coaches who are offensive or defensive coordinators somewhere else and under contract, their agents are absolutely talking through back channels with these franchises about things. I'm not at all going to be surprised when it's Christmas time and the Houston Texans ostensibly have a head coach that just has to sign on the dotted line.
I'm just saying, I think there will be better. I want to be on record. I think there will be. Let me ask. Go ahead, please, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Because I think the number one thing you want to wrap up is make sure you have a quarterback. He's got that. Of the two other things we're talking about, the Jets and the Falcons, Sam Darnold, I am not sure about his future. Maybe if they're awful and they're an 0-for team and they're in the tank for Trevor Lawrence situation, maybe that dynamic changes. But you might have an ownership who wants to stick with Sam Darnold, give him another year or two. You got the Falcons who have Matt Ryan, who's getting up there in age. That's the one reason. The quarterback is the most important position in the game. You have to have one or you have no chance. And I think he's got one he could build and pair his career with, where it could be Eric Bieniemy and Deshaun Watson together lifting this organization to new heights. They do have some issues. They could fill those in free agency, other places, because I do think Deshaun Watson is a player that would attract some free agent talent if you couldn't do it through the draft.
All right, fair enough. I'm just saying, if you go to the Jets and you make a wild card game once, they're going to name schools and babies after you. Okay, they're going to name schools and babies after you. And Houston just fired a guy that won 10 and 11 games the last 2 years. And they don't have a lot of talent other than the quarterback right now and J.J. Watt on defense. But we shall see. Great discussion. Excellent work, Danny Crennel.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.